옳은 것과 그른 것, 지켜야 할 것과 고쳐야 할 것을 구분해 더 좋은 법으로 진화할 수 있도록 새로운 기준을 세우는 일. 이것이 우리가 생각하는 혁신입니다. 우리는 더 큰 세상을 봅니다. 법으로 사람과 사람을 잇고 문화와 문화를 이어 전 세계에 KLO를 전합니다. 언제나 한 걸음 앞선 도전으로 나와 우리 대한민국을 넘어 세상을 이끌어갑니다. 우리는 좋은 법의 바탕을 만듭니다. 단 한 사람도 소외받지 않고 더 안전하게, 더 행복한 삶을 누릴 수 있도록 오늘도 법의 정신을 지켜갑니다. 법은 곧 우리의 삶이고 미래이기에 지금껏 해왔던 것처럼 앞으로도 사람과 삶을 위한 좋은 법의 바탕을 만들겠습니다. 우리는 한국법제연구원입니다.
May I have your attention, please? The session will begin shortly, so please come inside and be seated. 안녕하세요. 한국법제연구원과 이클레이 한국사무소가 공동 주관하는 세션이 곧 시작될 예정이니 참석자 여러분들께서는 자리에 앉아주시기 바랍니다. Okay, the session will begin shortly, so please be seated, everyone. 네, 여기 계신 모든 분들은 착석해 주시면 감사드립니다. Good morning, everyone. My name is Yoon, and I'm the head of policy and knowledge management of ICLEI Korea. Thank you very much for joining us here today for the session co-hosted by the Korea Legislation Research Institute and ICLEI Korea. Let me begin our session with pop quiz. There are 50,000 people are gathering here in Baku to tackle the climate change issues. So what do you think the important factors, the necessary factors to deal with climate change? Can anybody give us idea? What are the requisites to overcome this crisis and disasters? 지금 50만 명이 넘는 사람들이 그 기후 변화를 기후변화에 대응하기 위해서 여기 바코에 모여 있는데 이렇게 기후변화에 대응하고 넷 제로로 가기 위해서 가장 필요한 요소들이 무엇일까요? Please give us some ideas. Eunice, Erican? Okay. Absolutely. Trust. And what else? Okay. Governance. Good. Governance. Yeah, maybe cooperation between government and citizens, cooperation between government and businesses, right? We need governance. Good opinions, but personally, I believe that two most important factors are finance and legislation, right? So we are talking about finance in the main conference room on the negotiation table at this time. So today we will deal with legislation today here so that COP29 can talk about both finance and legislation at the same time. So today's session will proceed as follows. First, we will listen to welcoming speech and opening speech, followed by 3 different presentations from Europe, America, and Asia. And then we will have an expert covering legislative role to support local governments. And then we'll move on Q&A session. So if you have any questions, please hold them until the end of the session. So now I'm going to invite Mr. Young-Soo Han, President of the Korean Legislation Research Institute. Mr. Young-Soo Han had spent most years of his career in the Ministry of Government Registration, so I can say that he is the genuine expert of registration. And this research institute has been working on producing like very effective and productive solutions to overcome the climate issues for the last 15 years. So let's welcome him with a big round of applause for opening speech.
Hello, good morning, everyone. I'm Young-Soo Han, President of Korea Legislation Research Institute. Today, I'm very happy to meet all of you, and it's my great honor to make opening remarks at this COP29 Korea Pavilion side event, co-hosted by ICLEI and KLRI. First of all, I'd like to thank you all for joining us today. And my special thanks goes to all the distinguished guests. Yunus Arikan for his welcoming remarks, and Josko Klisovic, President of Assembly Zagreb, Croatia, and Hollis Winston, Mayor, City of Brooklyn Park, Minnesota, USA, and Park Sung-won from Korea, Mayor, City of Gwangmyeong, Republic of Korea, and Dr. Jang Eun-hye from KLRI for their presentations today. As she mentioned before, Korea Legislation Research Institute is government-funded research institute. We focus on various fields of legal and legislation issues, including climate changes. Recently, we are working very closely together with the central and local government to identify key issues related to carbon neutrality in cities. And as we all understand, the role of local governments are very important, even essential in achieving carbon neutrality. And that is not just because the local government is at the forefront of implementing government policy, but also because local government's policy reflects the exact needs and characteristics of people who are living in local communities. Through today's seminar, although it's very short time seminar, I hope that we can identify the efforts of all the cities around the world, and we can share the experience, ideas, and know-hows to promote transition to sustainable cities. Any ideas and any suggestions will be welcomed for that purpose. And I do believe that all the valuable opinions suggested today will provide deep insight for all of us. Finally, I'd like to thank to ICLEI and its staffs for their effort to organize this event together with us. Without their help, this event wouldn't be possible. And I look forward to continued cooperation and exchanges with KLRI and ICLEI. Once again, thank you for joining us today and wish you good luck. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Han, for your warm words. We have Mr. Yunus Erikan, Director of Global Advocacy of ICLEI. He has been working for multilateral cooperation, multi-level cooperation between international bodies and local governments around the world since 2013. And he is one of the most, busiest person in ICLEI. And luckily, we have Yunus Erikan here in our session. So please welcome him with a big round of applause.
Thank you, Yoon, for this very kind introduction. It's an honor for me to join. I'm always feeling at home when I'm coming to Korean pavilions across all these journeys. Korea cities have been recognized as the most effective implementing of Local Agenda 21. When we hosted the Rio Plus 20 in Rio, Korea was rewarded or announced as the best country to implement Local Agenda 21. That's why we are always feeling excited, motivated when we are meeting with our Korean leaders, Korean partners. So congratulations for ICLEI Korea and the Korean Legislative Institute for convening this event. I'd like to share a couple of words from the global perspective. I'd also share some kickoff ideas. In Korea, we have more than 50 members. It's growing. That's one of the biggest networks. We have a network of 2,500 cities, towns, and regions across the world in 24 offices, and Korea has been one of the most active ones. And I would like to recognize our regional executive committee member, Ms. Mayor Park. ICLEI Korea office is hosted in Gyeonggi-do province, and Seoul Metropolitan Government is also hosting ICLEI's East Asia Secretariat. So we have a strong partners and base in Korea. Having said that, we also would like to remind ourselves how Korean cities were active. We will discuss more in details, but when we were discussing about the multi-level action, which was the legacy that we have achieved in Paris Agreement, when we were going to Glasgow, we were pushing the local governments to connect to their peers so that they increase their ambition. So collectively, all Korean cities announced their commitment to climate neutrality, and which was then fed into the Korean national process. That, I think, was an excellent demonstration of bottom-up work, and this paved the way when we reached to Dubai. The paragraph 161 is now referring that parties are urged for multi-level action, which means it is not just a voluntary initiative, but it is a duty for national governments to work with their local governments in the preparation of the new climate policies. So in that sense, Korea is one of the first countries to join our CHAMP initiative among the world's nations, 74 now. And we are excited that this shows a good practice. And I'd like to touch briefly on really the importance of the legislative perspective, because when we say multi-level action, We of course talk about the collaboration between local, subnational, and national governments. But of course, we are not just talking on only the executive bodies. They may make commitments. They may of course develop their plans, but the citizen engagement and the approval of their constituencies are coming from the legislative assemblies, and we will hear more from our leader from Zagreb. But in that sense, the executive and legislative branches at the local councillor level, at the municipal level, is extremely important, because if you bring different parties, be it opposition, be it in different political ranges, if they can align their forces, that would be strengthening our commitments to a more long-term perspective. And over these couple of months, we have been working on this idea of the town halls, the stock takes, that climate emergency declarations at the council level, giving power to the administrative leaders, or giving more scrutiny to them so that they deliver their commitments, is what we have been asking for. So in that regard, we look forward to these models in Korea. We have also worked with the national associations in Germany, US, and Brazil. And maybe you heard yesterday the Brazilian new NDC has come up. So from this discussion, we look forward to Korean NDC being more ambitious, and we will look forward to working with Mayor Park. But more important, to share this experience globally, that other countries, other cities can also benefit from this experience. You are hearing that political elections, our leaders will talk about it, it is imposed by so many different factors. They are distracted, they are torn apart around the world, be it south, be it north. If we put climate change on the agenda, this is something that unites us. It doesn't matter whether you are red or green or yellow in your party, but at the end of the day, we're all impacted. We see in all around the world, and the livelihoods, the benefits will also be shared. It should be a shared prosperity for all of us with this low carbon transition from urban poor to all our partners. So the more we can tell our citizens that this is serving them, our committed leaders could be empowered, they can be asked for doing more, and they can also bring others on board. And this is exactly what we need, bringing citizens behind the leaders, or the leaders to be the spokesperson of their citizens, so that climate ambition is not a political agenda, it's a survival agenda, and we have a responsibility, every leader, every citizen. So in that coming age, we will also continue this work to bring our local governments through the town hall COPs, so that before COP meetings come here, they interact with their national governments and discuss this, so that the examples we will hear from today onwards will be replicated at home, which is the real work where we have to bring the results. So with this in mind, I'm really excited to hear all of you. Congratulations once again to our dear leaders in Korea and partners in Korea. And once again, also thanks to our guest partners across the world, ICLEI members, ICLEI partners. We are so happy to have this dialogue with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Eunice. Before really getting into the session, I'd like to invite all the speakers for our family photo. So please come forward. 세션을 시작하기 전에 저희 연사분들 한번 기념사진 촬영하도록 하겠습니다. 모두 앞으로 나와주시면 감사드립니다. Thank you very much for your cooperation. Please be seated. Okay. Okay, so for today's session, again, we are joined by representatives from different regions, from Europe, from America, and from South Korea. So it's like gonna be traveling around the world. We will start from Europe. So the first presenter is Mr. Josko Klisovic. He is the member of European Committee of the Regions and the president of Assembly of Zagreb. And when I was selecting speakers for this session, one of our European colleagues strongly recommended him to include these sessions by saying that he was the rapporteur of the Committee of the Region report on EU's governance regulation. And he will talk about the role of multi-level governance in European cities for climate neutrality. Please come forward, and the floor is yours. Use the pointer for that.
This is what? Good morning to everybody. As our moderator said, I'm coming from Zagreb, capital of Croatia, and I'm deeply involved in the European Committee of the Regions. But let me, from the very beginning, comment on the first remark of our moderator when she said the most important assets for climate change transformation is money and legislation. Fine, that's true in part. These are tangible assets which are absolutely crucial for good implementation. But there are intangible assets which are equally important. Without them, you can't be successful in climate action transformation. And these intangible assets are skills of your people who should implement legislation and who should manage the project financed by money. If they are not skillful enough, believe me, you won't be successful. And the second thing is good governance. And I'm not talking just about relationships between local government, national government, in our case, European Union or global framework. I'm talking about citizens as well. And trust of the citizens, you need to win. Support of the citizens, you need to win in order to be successful. Because citizens are by default very reluctant to support change if they don't see benefits from themselves. You need to explain that to them. And climate action is deeply transformative action within our societies. So unless citizens really see what's there for them, how that action will transform their lives for the better and bring better quality of life for themselves, they won't support you. But let me go one by one from the very beginning. Legislation framework, very important. In the European Union, we realized that 2020 was a year when we passed the new Green Deal, European Green Deal. That was considered as the growth strategy. So it was a policy document, policy idea. But obviously, we needed to translate that policy idea into legislation, into legislative framework. So that's what we have been doing the last 4 to 5 years. We were trying really to give the legal foundation to European Green Deal. And Green Deal was, as I said, considered as a growth strategy. And we set certain targets. It went across the board, through all the sectors. So you need to revise legislation in majority of the sectors, like transport, health, energy policy, climate policy, agriculture policy. And these changes at the beginning were met with resistance of the citizens. Some of them even demonstrated in Brussels, like farmers. But we really pushed forward as the European Union, aware that the European Green Deal is the best developing and growth strategy in the current circumstances. It balances economic aspect with the social aspect, environmental aspect and climate aspect. It's a good balance of everything, and that is most important. This is an art, really, to think out, to design such a strategy which takes care comprehensively of all the sectors and different interests. So we pushed forward and we really revised legislation. We enacted new pieces of legislation in order to formalize legally Green Deal as a strategy. We did it well. Now we are in a phase of implementation. So we are now really able to see how good we are, how effective our Green Deal was, and did we really hit the target or we missed the point? And I have to say, not everything is so ideal as one would wish it to be. So we realized that sometimes we came up with too many initiatives, too many legislative proposals, which are not reconciled among themselves, but they are sometimes conflicting. So at the local level, and we at the local level are about to implement 80% of the Green Deal. We are in a position that we don't know what to implement. We have one set of targets for Fit for 55 initiative, then the other set of targets for Repower Europe, then in agricultural policy, then in transport policy, and they're not reconciled. They are kind of conflicting. Then we have different kind of methodologies to report on all of these commitments. So we don't know what to report, we don't know what to implement, because if you implement targets from agricultural policy, you can't implement targets from energy policy or health policy, and you have a problem at the city and region level. So that's why we call from the European Committee of the Regions for more coherent legal framework, where all these commitments will be reconciled among each other. And we have one policy framework, one legal framework, so we at the local level would know what to implement. And I developed as a rapporteur, moderator mentioned that I was rapporteur for the multi-level governance, a formula which I call SICK formula. Because the system is sick, you need a SICK formula. But SICK goes for simplification. So we need to simplify legal framework, reporting mechanisms, supervising mechanisms, everything must be much more simpler. Then I goes for integration. We need to integrate all the policies under one roof. As I mentioned, agricultural policy and health policy, transport policy and energy policy, climate change policy and environmental policy. Everything must be reconciled in coherent policy framework. And then C, from SICK, simplification, integration, and collaboration. And this is where we go to multi-level governance. So cooperation between local authorities who are in charge of implementation and national authorities is absolutely crucial. And then it's very important that you have collaboration with the European level as well, in our case. But what do we have in practice? We have a situation where we managed to establish consultation mechanism with our governments. And we agreed that we should draft national energy and climate plans, which should be the document to reconcile all these different policies and the differences, different goals. But that didn't go that well as we wished for. So the mechanism could be set in motion only by the government. So local authorities had to wait. And then government comes at the very end of the process with its own policies and targets, asking us, local governments, city governments, regional governments, to implement. And we said, wait. You're coming to us at the end of the process, selling your product, and you want us to buy it, and we don't know what's in it? It won't fly. It simply won't fly. Then we have kind of tense relationships, between us. We told them, if you want us to implement such important policies, we need to be part of designing these policies. So you should consult us upfront at the very beginning of shaping these policies and setting these goals. Then we will feel the ownership of the process. We will feel that we are part of the process. We will know what to implement, so we'll do it. In this situation like this, when you put us in a position, fait accompli position, or you come to us and say, this should be implemented, we won't simply do it, because we can't do it. We don't know what to do it. We don't have skillful personnel, or even we don't We didn't allocate enough money in our budgets for such purposes. So this job should not be done without us. We should be, as the local authorities, as implementing agencies of climate action policies, we should be involved in decision making from the very beginning. And that's what we call good multi-level governance. So that's why I proposed as the rapporteur, and the European Committee of the Regions accepted it as our proposal towards legislators in the European Union, that we established permanent consultative mechanism between governments and local authorities, which could be set in motion not only on the initiative of government, but on the initiative of local authorities as well. So whenever you feel a need to consult with the government on certain aspect of climate change policies, you would have opportunity and possibility to do it. You will just request government, and governments must respond. Currently, you can request, but the government, it doesn't need to respond. It depends on the government whether it wants or not. But now, with my proposal, governments will be obliged to respond on the initiative of local governments. I'm speaking of national governments, will be obliged to respond on the initiative of local governments to discuss all the matters related to climate policy and targets. This is very important. And then, once we had that agreed, and in Croatia, I have to say, we managed to do that, we realized that we can't wait for the government, so we established regional Zagreb Energy and Climate Agency, which is our expert arm. These are people who are really going deeply into the matter, coming to us politicians with concrete proposals, concrete strategies, concrete projects which should be implemented in order to implement a policy. So we get, something very important. And then we go to government and say, look, we managed to design this kind of policies and projects. Do you agree? Government is happy. Government is very happy because somebody did the job which they should have done. And so they accepted it. And we established very good relationships with the government. Then we understood that that's not enough. This is really deeply transformative policy, climate change policy. It goes in all aspects and segments of the society. So we involve stakeholders as well. Private business, very important, because you don't have enough public money for all the projects you need. Private sector is a center of excellence of innovation. They have research and development in their companies. They come up with very innovative solutions. So this is important as well, to involve them. Civil society and citizens, equally important. Without their support, you can't really implement anything, because you will have demonstrations on the streets, you will have resistance, you'll have media reports that your policies are not supported by your citizens, and that's a big and huge problem. What we did in Zagreb, we organize every year Citizens' Assembly, where we gather all the citizens, civil society, trade unions, business community, under one roof of the city assembly, and we speak about these issues. And then, in order not to turn the event into an event where everybody criticizes current government, then we bring even the mayors of European cities, which have good or best practices in certain fields, to really explain to us how they did it and what we should really follow from their example. And we managed to really engage citizens in very constructive discussion. And that discussion resulted in a set of recommendations, which then I, as the President of the City Assembly, sent to Croatian government, to European Parliament, to European Commission, and the President of the European Committee of Regions. So we made really an impact on our legislators at national and European level, and we feel that we are now part of the process. So that's why we are ready to implement everything what is coming from Europe or from national government. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Klisovic, for sharing your insights based on your experience. I'm very sorry for picking finance and legislation for the most important elements for go carbon neutral, but I'm a realist when it comes to international relations. But what is luckily we have a balance here. There is a mayor from Gangneung City, and he puts a lot of importance in citizen partnership, citizen participation. And we have Eunice Erican, who is working in the for the multi-level cooperation. And also we have Mayor Winston, who puts a lot of importance on the network and communication. And again, we have Mr. Young Soo-han and me, who love tangible things. So again, we have balance here. So thank you very much for your speech. And now let's move on to America. Our second presenter is Mr. Hollis Winston, the mayor of City of Brooklyn Park, Minnesota. He was the CEO of Guaranteed America, a startup providing consulting services to non-profit organizations, local governments, and regulatory agencies. And I did some search online, and I saw your interview saying that you love networking and communications. So I look forward to hearing from you. So his presentation is about local action, global goods. Please welcome him with a big round of applause. Over to you.
Well, thank you so much for the wonderful introduction. And thank you to ICLEI and the Republic of Korea for inviting and having me here today. So my name is Hollis Winston. I'm mayor of the wonderful city of Brooklyn Parks, or a city of about 90,000 off the Mississippi in the state of Minnesota in the United States of America. But I'm not here just representing my city and my state. I'm also here representing the Mississippi River Cities, Towns, and Initiative, and we'll get into a little bit about why that's so critical right now. So being part of or right off of the Mississippi gives us a number of opportunities as a state. That's why we're involved with MRCTI. But I want to get into just a little bit about when people are talking about the actual success or the work that's going on. There's a few things that have been happening in our city of Brooklyn Park. So I just want to also reassure people that the work of moving forward with battling and fighting climate change, no matter who's in office at our federal level, is going to continue at the city level and at the state level. And here's why. We are right off the Mississippi River. When we look at the Mississippi River, it provides about 40% of the agriculture for the entire United States. About $1 trillion of goods go down that river as well. It encompasses about 3.2 kilometers. I'm trying to translate from miles to kilometers. 3.2 kilometers, square kilometers across the entire region, and about 31 states. If you recall, there's only 50 states in the United States. And so it's an incredibly important ecological structure in terms of what we do. And so whatever happens on that river directly affects the economy, not only of the United States, but where I live as well. So some of the work that we have done in our city is, one thing is we have implemented the largest solar panel gathering or structure within our state for cities. So all of our police force, all of our maintenance, all of our operations and fire department, all of that runs off of that. And that came about through a public and private partnership. But also, we know that we just cannot do this work alone. So we're actually part of the Mississippi River Cities and Towns Initiative, or MRCTI, because they're doing some incredible work in terms of renaturing about 100,000 acres across, up and down the Mississippi. So that what affects me affects folks down river. So we actually have another mayor here. You guys have heard from her, Melissa Logan from Blytheville, Arkansas. So we're working together to renature that area. So that means creating more wetland, creating more forests, so that we can capture more of the water. Because one of the issues that we're dealing with off the Mississippi is increased droughts and increased floods. So that affects us in this way. Since 2005, we have experienced around $250 billion in losses from extreme drought. We're currently in a $20 billion 3-year drought. But we've also experienced an incredible amount of floods. So that's harming the economy as well. And when we have those droughts, the barges cannot get down the river to deliver the products that they need to. But when we have the floods, that affects our farmers' ability to do work, but it also affects the residents that are up and down that river. So this 100,000 acres that's going to be renatured is going to allow us to capture more of that water and slow down the floods when they occur. But when droughts happen, it'll be able to get more water out to the farm so that we can continue to do business as well. The other thing, from a global climate perspective, is that it's going to, over time, capture around 320,000, I forget the word, of carbon out there. So it's incredibly important to the structure is incredibly important to the overall global economy, but also the climate effort as well. We also feed from that basin 1 out of 12 people across the country. So the way we're able to do that, when we step back to the local level, is we were able to get some federal dollars, but also some federal tax credits, but also a state grant. And then we put that together with some public financing, so they were able to afford the solar panels that we're able to run our city off of. But when we talk about that larger coalition of what MRCTI is doing, they were able to pull funds from the Inflation Reduction Act, as well as the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act. And so it's about $22 million that have been put together with that. And then there's some public and private relationships that have been created so that we can deploy that infrastructure to renature that area and to help save the Mississippi area. So it's taken a number of partnerships, and when we talk about that finance piece and when we talk about that legislation piece, those two are working together to allow us to do the work that we're going to do on the Mississippi. I also think it's important that we have organizations like MRCTI for a number of reasons. When you talk about a city of my size, 90,000, we have resources, but we do not have the number of resources to deploy the infrastructure that is necessary to work up and down the Mississippi. What MRCTI and organizations like them bring, non-governmental organizations, they bring in a capacity to coordinate. So as a city, we can control our little neck of the woods. But when we talk about building relationships with the Cargill, with some of the people that are with the Ducks Unlimited, who's going to be helping to deploy many of those resources to work on that 100,000 acres, we don't have the capacity to do that. And I think sometimes people forget, when we are elected as local officials, we have 1,000 things on our plate. Climate is increasingly becoming one of those top priorities. We're also concerned about jobs. We're also concerned about public safety, and there's a number of other issues. So when we talk to our residents, climate is not always the first thing on their mind, but climate is incredibly important to an organization like MRCTI. So when we're not working on that, they're able to continue to do the work. They also bring a level of technical expertise and just an understanding of how to engage within the government, the federal government, but also increasingly international structures like the UN. And then they have a shared agenda. So the ability for me as a city to coordinate and work with Blytheville, Arkansas, or other cities up and down the Mississippi, that's difficult for me to do unless I have somebody like MRCTI who is willing to do some of the work that ICLEI is doing, right? Bringing partners together, holding these conversations, and helping to continuously move the ball forward. So I think it's incredibly important that we understand that it's not just, there's a huge finance piece here. There's also a legislation piece, but I think there's also a place for organizations like MRCTI to continue to do this work. And that leads me into my next part. When we ask organizations like MRCTI to bring together local organizations who do not always have the resources, well, MRCTI needs to find those resources to help with that particular coordination. And so I think that's one of the reasons they put forth the National Coordination on Adaptation and Resilience for Security Act. Now, that's very much a U.S. thing or a U.S. concept, but the basic concept is this, is that finances or resources are required to just do the basic organizing, to have work groups. So for a Brooklyn Park, Minnesota, or Blytheville, Arkansas, to be able to engage the federal government on a regular basis, there needs to be infrastructure for us even to have those conversations with our own Congress people, senators, or even folks at the federal level when we talk about engaging the president's office as well. So I think that's something that needs to apply not just within the United States, but it's also something that we increasingly need to say, how are we going to finance the organizations that are doing the work of the ICLEI? How are we going to finance the organizations that are going to do the work of an MRCTI so that they can continue to engage at the local level and continue to push this work forward no matter who's in office at the federal level. So I want to thank all of you for the time to speak here today, but I just want to make that personal pitch to say this work is key. It's going to continue at the local level in the United States. We've been talking to some other governors and some other folks. It's going to continue at the state level as well. And there's basically been a whole economy in the United States that has been created from a lot of this green work around climate change. And that's being integrated increasingly into what we consider the traditional economy. So it's just now part of the economy. So when you talk about that piece, and then you talk about the work of MRCTI in terms of deploying these resources, this work is here to stay. There's very much a will within the United States to continue this work. And we know that not just for climate change reasons, but also just for basic jobs, basic security, economic security for people, the security for people to live without floods, without drought. We know that this work is important and it has to continue. So thank you all for your time.
Thank you very much, Mayor Winston. It's a quite informative speech about the coalition in Mississippi area. And I was very impressed by what the MRCTI is doing for the expanding RE, renewable energy, and cooperation fight against the natural disasters and keep economy flourish. So it was really good to hear from you. And from Europe, America, and now we'll move on to South Korea from Gwangmyeong City. I will invite Mr. Seung-won Park, the mayor of Gwangmyeong City, and he is the climate leader of ICLEI Korea Executive Committee, and also he puts a lot of priority on climate action. So he will talk about the city's achievement and future plans towards carbon neutrality. And as a Korean, it took about more than 16 hours from Korea to get here. So it's really an opportunity to, listen from the mayor of Korean City in person. So please welcome him with a big round of applause.
네, 만나서 반갑습니다. 한국법제연구원과 이클레이가 저에게 이렇게 발표할 수 있는 기회를 주셔서 대단히 감사합니다.
It's an honor to be here and present here to share our case.
네, 아주 비교적 간단하게 핵심만 말씀드리도록 하겠습니다. 아이폰 하면 애플이 떠오르죠. 애플 하면 아이폰이 떠오르고 아이폰의 가치가 높아질수록 애플의 가치가 높아질 거라고 생각합니다.
When you think of iPhone, doesn't Apple come to mind? Just as thinking of Apple brings up the iPhone, the more valuable the iPhone becomes, the more valuable Apple becomes, right?
마찬가지로 빅맥 하면 맥도날드가 떠오르고 맥도날드 하면 빅맥이 떠오를 것입니다.
Similarly, when you think of a Big Mac, doesn't McDonald's come to mind? And when you think of a McDonald's, wouldn't the Big Mac come to mind as well?
BTS 하면 K-팝이 떠오르죠. K-팝 하면 대표적인 한국의 가수 BTS가 떠오를 것입니다.
How about BTS? Would you come to mind K-culture and K-pop?
이처럼 광명시 하면 탄소 중립이 떠오를 수 있는 그런 도시를 만들어 가기 위해서 광명시는 최선을 다하고 있습니다.
In the same way, when you think of Gwangmyeong City, we would like to make you carbon neutrality comes to mind. Gwangmyeong City is making great effort to become a carbon neutral city.
네, 광명시는 서울 수도권에 있는 인구 약 30만의 아주 작은 도시입니다.
Gwangbyeong City is a small city in the metropolitan area with a population of less than 300,000. It is located right next to Seoul.
기후 위기는 단순한 탄소 배출 문제만 있는 것이 아니라 우리 시민들의 일상에서의 인권, 건강, 평화, 경제 등 모든 분야에서 영향을 끼치고 있습니다.
Climate crisis bring a huge impact on every domains of our citizens' daily lives, including their rights, health, peace, and economy.
따라서 광명시는 이러한 탄소 중립 시대를 위한 가치를 전환하는 것이 필요하고 이러한 새로운 시대에 몇 가지 필요한 6가지 키워드로 일을 진행하고 있습니다. 첫 번째, 자치분권, 평생학습, 탄소 중립, 자원순환, 사회적 경제, 정원 도시를 통해 넷째로 도시를 만들어 가고자 합니다.
Gwangbyeong City is building a carbon neutral era by focusing on 6 fundamental values. First, resident-centered autonomy and decentralization. Second, lifelong learning that promotes continuous education. Third, carbon neutrality. Fourth, daily resource circulation. Fifth, a social economy where these activities contribute economically. Lastly, a garden city. These 6 fundamental values are guiding the city's effort toward carbon neutral future.
광명시는 2018년도부터 시청 내에 제도적인 시스템을 구축하고 시민들과 함께 중간 지원 조직을 통해서 많은 일들을 해왔습니다. 기후 에너지과를 만들고 기후 에너지 센터를 만들고 녹색 건축 지원 센터를 만들고 환경교육 센터를 만들고 업사이클 아트 센터를 만들어서 시민들과 함께 다양한 사업을 전 분야에 걸쳐서 진행하고 있습니다.
Gwangbyeong City's full-scale effort to become a carbon-neutral city began in 2018. We established a climate and energy department, followed by the Climate Energy Center, the Green Building Support Center, the Environmental Education Center, and the Upcycle Arts Center. Through this intermediary support organization, a foundational system was created to allow the city and its citizens to work together toward a carbon neutral era.
이것은 작년에 2050 탄소 중립 도시를 선포하는 모습이고 12살의 초등학생이 2050년 탄소 중립을 꼭 실천해 달라고 하는 서약서를 저한테 전달하는 장면입니다.
This photo captures the scene from last year's Gwangbyeong City Carbon Neutrality Declaration ceremony, making the city's commitment to achieving carbon neutrality by 2050 together with citizens. In this moment, an elementary school student handed me a declaration asking me to promise to pursue this goal.
하나 둘. 예, 몇 가지 사업을 말씀드리겠습니다. 첫 번째는 시민이 주도하는 탄소 중립 활동을 하고 있습니다. 시민들이 각 마을에서 스스로 정원을 만드는 사업, 그리고 시민자치대학을 통해서 탄소 중립 학과과 정원도시 학과 등 다양한 학습을 진행하고 1.5도시 기후 이병이라고 하는 탄소 중립 활동하는 활동가들을 양성해 나가고 있는데 현재 만여 명이 참여하고 있습니다. 또한 이러한 실질적인 시민들의 탄소 중립 실천 활동을 지역 화폐로 지원하는 사업들을 진행하고 있습니다.
Let me introduce several our climate strategies. Gwangbyeong City's flagship carbon neutrality initiatives are led by citizen-driven activities. Residents participate actively in all neighborhoods, promoting learning through the Citizen Autonomy University, which support community-driven education. The city also runs the 1.5 Celsius goal climate resilience force program to train practical activities and those who participated are rewarded with the local currency, encouraging ongoing involvement.
재생 에너지 확대를 위해서 시민 에너지 협동 조합을 만들어서 모든 공공 시설에 태양광을 설치를 하고 건물과 주택에 태양광 보급 지원 사업과 수소 충전소 설치 등 재생 에너지 사업을 진행하고 있습니다.
We are carrying out a few projects to expand the use of renewable energy. We have established 2 energy cooperatives and are installing solar panels on the rooftop of all public facilities. Additionally, we support solar energy distribution project and are installing charging stations for electric and hydrogen vehicles. All efforts to increase renewable energy uses.
녹색 건축 실천 사업으로 공공 건축물에 대한 리모델링 사업으로 전기와 가스를 절감하고 그린 집수리 사업을 통해서 녹색 건축 사업을 실행해 나가고 있습니다.
As a part of our green building initiatives, we are remodeling public buildings and conducting green home repair projects. The remodeling efforts have achieved significant electricity and gas saving compared to 2015 levels.
업사이클 사업을 통해서 업사이클 문화 클러스터를 조성하고 산업을 육성하고 생활 폐기물 처리 시스템을 개선해서 대형 생활 폐기물을 포함한 폐 가전 등 모든 것을 무료로 수거하는 시스템을 갖추었습니다.
The resource circular economy includes establishing an upcycle center to foster industry growth and promote upcycling culture. We are also pioneering nationwide projects that provide free collection services for household waste, discarded electronics, and bulky waste items like furniture.
마을 곳곳에 생활 정원을 만들어가기 위해서 시민들이 직접 정원을 조성하는 사업들을 꾸준히 진행해 가고 있습니다.
We are creating a garden city where residents can reach garden within the 5 minutes of stepping outside.
기후 대응 기금을 조성하고 온실가스 감축 인지 예산제 등 다양한 형태의 제도적 기반들을 확대해 나가고 있습니다.
Regarding institutional framework and policy advancement, we are implementing projects to establish a climate fund and have introduced a greenhouse gas reduction conscious budgeting system ahead of national government.
모든 부서에 ESG 사업을 실현할 수 있는 시스템을 갖춰서 진행해 나가고 있습니다.
We are building an ESG framework every department can implement it.
ESG 산업 생태계 구축을 위한 창업 스타트업을 육성해 나가는 사업들도 진행하고 있습니다.
To build an ESG industrial ecosystem, we are creating a framework to evaluate, consult, and financially support the overall ESG management of local small and medium-sized enterprise. And also, we are conducting initiatives to foster ESG-friendly startups. 탄소 중립 스마트 시티를 만들기 위해서 160억을 투자해서 현재 사업을 진행해 나가고 있습니다. To create a carbon neutral smart city, we have secured 16 billion won and are advancing project around the KTX high-speed rail station.
광명시는 기후 위기로부터 시민의 삶을 지키는 도넛 도시를 만들어 가기 위해서 노력하고 있습니다.
Gwangbyeong City aims to be a donor city that protects citizens' lives from the climate crisis. We strive to fill any shortage needed for a basic quality of life while reducing excessive working together to achieve a carbon neutral city.
기후 대응을 위해서는 지방 정부가 더 다양한 법과 조례를 만들어서 사업들을 추진해 가야 합니다. 우리 광명시는 끊임없이 중앙정부의 건의를 통해서 중앙정부의 에너지 분권 차원에서의 에너지 교부세를 확보하기 위한 노력을 해나갈 것이고 지방 재정 확대를 통한 탄소 중립 사업들을 할 수 있도록 그 역할을 꾸준히 진행해 나갈 것입니다. 함께 노력했으면 좋겠습니다.
We gonna put the endless the effort to push our national government to provide the grant for implementing our climate the initiatives to foster our the community to be safe from the climate crisis. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor Bach. Once again, I would like to emphasize that Gwangmyeong City is the very first local government in Korea to do the stock take and first local government to establish the Department of Climate and Energy in Korea. So he is such a pioneer, I can say. So last but not least, we have presenter Dr. Eun-hae Chang, team leader of climate change legislation from the Korea Legislation Research Institute. She's a PhD in law, and she has been doing research on green growth and legislation more than 10 years. And she will talk about the legal challenges for cities to go net zero, focusing on the role of local governments. Please join me to welcome her with a big round of applause.
Good afternoon. I'm Eun-hae Chang. I'm grateful for the opportunity to meet such wonderful people at today's seminar. It would have been challenging to bring together such esteemed individuals directly, so I'm pleased to have this chance to connect with you through ICLEI. As President Young-Soo Han mentioned in the opening remarks, my institute KLRI specializes in researching legal systems. Within KLRI, the climate change legislation team primarily focuses on laws and institutions related to climate change and carbon neutrality among various legislative areas. In its early stages, my team was primarily involved in activities aimed at supporting legislation for the central government. However, in recent years, we have also been focusing on researching the laws and institutions necessary to support carbon neutrality at the local level. Today, rather than focusing on the relationship between central and local governments, we aim to place greater emphasis on the spatial concept of the city. It would be beneficial to explore the significance that laws and institutions hold in achieving carbon neutrality within urban spaces, and to consider how these laws and institutions should be designed to effectively support the goals of urban carbon neutrality. I would like to address the topic in three main points as follows. The first point is carbon neutrality in cities. The second point is the connection between urban carbon neutrality and regional policies. The third point is the legal challenges in supporting carbon neutrality in cities. Let's begin by examining the discussion surrounding carbon neutrality in cities. Urban sustainability and carbon neutrality are concepts that must be considered together. Looking at the history of urban development, we can identify three common themes. The first is creating a more environmentally friendly city. The second is establishing fair living conditions within the city. The third is restructuring urban spaces to generate economic benefits. The progress of these discussions on restructuring urban spaces began with early sanitary reforms and has recently extended to achieving carbon neutrality. From the perspective of the relationship between urban paradigms and carbon neutrality, examining key features of cities reveals that during the era focused on sanitation improvements, the emphasis was on the importance of physical infrastructure. However, in the current era, where specific carbon neutrality targets are set, we face need for structural changes across society, extending beyond the low carbon urban paradigm that primarily focuses on reducing carbon emissions. Why is carbon neutrality important in cities? This is because cities with their dense population, industrial and consumption activities, and concentrated energy use, and are major direct and indirect sources of national greenhouse gas emissions. Next, we need to consider the connection between cities' carbon neutrality and regional policies. When striving to achieving carbon neutrality in cities, it is essential to consider why proactive and robust planning and policy implementation at a new level is necessary. The physical built environment, including urban form, infrastructure, and buildings, is not easily changed once it is established. This is why linking local policies is crucial for achieving carbon neutrality in cities. Linking the goal of achieving carbon neutrality in cities with local policies offers the following advantages. First, it allows the integration of local characteristics into carbon neutrality policies. Additionally, locally tailored policies that align with the unique conditions and needs of each region can be an effective approach for achieving carbon neutrality goals. Second, it enables more effective resources management. Achieving carbon neutrality in cities requires the management and allocation of resources across various sectors such as transportation, energy, buildings, and waste. Local policies can help manage these resources efficiently, reducing overall carbon emissions. Third, linking carbon neutrality goals with local policies has the advantage of more effectively enhancing citizen engagement and awareness. Achieving carbon neutrality relies heavily on public cooperation and participation. By connecting with local policies, cities can raise awareness about the importance of carbon neutrality and provide citizens with opportunity to engage in sustainable practices in their daily lives. Fourth, it offers the advantage of enabling swift responsiveness. Local policies can be implemented more rapidly than national policies. They also quickly adjustments according to local conditions, enabling cities to respond more effectively and efficiently in pursuing carbon neutrality goals. Finally, linking carbon neutrality with regional policies can bring sustainability and economic benefits to cities. Local policies surrounding carbon neutrality not only promote sustainable urban development, but also provide economic benefits, such as creating green jobs and reducing energy costs. Why do we consider laws and institutions to achieve carbon neutrality in cities? If we consider the general characteristics of laws and institutions, the answer becomes clear. The general characteristics of laws and institutions are as follows. First, laws and institutions establish standards. Second, they specify rights and obligations. Third, they serve as a minimum safeguard to ensure the sustainability of policies. Additionally, through laws and institutions, we can create systems and procedures for effectively implementing and overseas policies. What roles can the national and local governments play to achieve this? First, the national government can establish comprehensive and foundational legislation to ensure policy consistency. In South Korea, for example, there is the Framework Act on carbon neutrality. Additionally, the government can develop specific legal standards to implement carbon neutrality spatially. This could include developing projects to create net zero cities, supporting local governments in project planning, and providing financial assistance. Furthermore, the government could institutionalize the integration of mandatory considerations for the carbon neutrality transition into urban planning. What role can local governments play in achieving carbon neutrality in cities? At the city level, the entity responsible for establishing spatial plans is the local government. Additionally, the local government is best suited to reflect the unique characteristics of cities and regions. Local governments can link carbon neutrality plans with spatial planning within their regions and establish organizations dedicated to advancing carbon neutrality at the local level. Moreover, by organizing local community stakeholders, they can make policies for the transition to carbon neutrality more concrete and actionable. Achieving carbon neutrality in cities requires efforts and collaboration from multiple angles. As mentioned in the previous presentations, establishing frameworks for local government, community activities, and planning and implementation at the local government level requires the support of laws and regulations. It seems now is the time for research to further develop and concretize these laws and institutions, incorporating ambitious elements. With the insightful opinions shared today, we will continue our research to advance even more effective laws and policies. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Zhang. I totally agree with you in terms of legislation can pave the way for the local governments to push forward their policies. And also I get to know that through your presentation that legislation also can set standards and secure rights and obligations. It was quite informative. So shall we move on to the Q&A? So I'd like to invite all the speakers forward. Please come forward. 네, 잠시 질의응답 시간을 갖도록 하겠습니다. 연사분들을 앞에 모시고 네, 질의응답 시간을 가질 건데요. 질문 있으신 분들은 손을 한번 들어주시기 바랍니다. Okay, now we will have a Q&A session. So if you have any questions for speakers, please raise your hand. Okay.
I have a question. Okay. I have a question to Mr. Hollis Winston. First of all, I really thank you for your the insightful presentation. So for MRCTI, so what's the meaning of renature? Is it means of the transformation of the land use from the farmland to the nature land?
Yeah, that's it right there. So reestablishing a lot of the wetlands or even forests, right? Using that natural, what it naturally used to be, helping restore back to that so that it can go back to the function of what it used to serve. So right now, you have a lot of farmland, you have a lot of structures, or just metastructures that were created incorrectly along the Mississippi that are not able to hold the water, are not able to function like wetlands, right? So it's helping to reestablish a lot of that so that we can get back to what it initially used to be.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay. Actually, I brought a couple of. You have questions? Okay.
Thank you. First of all, the inspirational leadership probably would be a very obvious question to Mayor from the U.S. because this is the debate in the last 4 days. You have made intensive reference to the collaboration with state and federal government, which we always had acknowledged because be it investments, be it preparations and disasters recovery, far above the municipal budgets. However, how would be your expectations, your alternatives for an upcoming era? How will you make sure IRA type legislation is still preserved? In that relation, when I listened to Mayor Park, I did not hear too much on the government, national government support. It seemed to be that it is really city-driven. Especially, we were discussing before the meeting, the Korean NDC is expected to come in a couple of months. Are there any proposals, and this question is in fact also going to our colleagues, what is a proposal to have something different in the new Korean NDC that will help efforts like Mayor Park or others, so that will there be a multi-level collaboration much more clearly defined in the NDC, and how that can be reflected to the legislative? So there is the situation in the US where there's already existing multi-level collaboration functioning, but there is a risk that it may be weakened in future. And in Korea, there is an opportunity that you may even increase maybe. So the country conditions are different. How is this debate at the national and local level? So that's what I am eager to hear.
So I guess I can go ahead and I can start off. I'd say, regarding the first part, when you talk about the Inflation Reduction Act and some of the other Jobs Infrastructure Act, Bipartisan Infrastructure Act, there's a reality. You go through an election, you're doing your best to differentiate yourself, right, from your opponent. What I will say is this, is that the United States is organized, the federal, the state level, 50 states, the Congress people, and the senators that represent those states are not interested in stopping the work of the Inflation Reduction Act. It's created thousands of jobs. The reality is it's created, in a very short period of time, it has created a new economy, a greener economy. And people are beginning to see, the reality is on the ground, when you talk to your average resident and you say, well, climate change, they may not necessarily understand how that translates into jobs, how that affects them at home. But I think now that people have seen the actual jobs that have been created from this, the new industry, right, they're much more inclined at that congressional level to fight and say we're not going backwards when it comes to the Inflation Reduction Act. So I think there will be a number of voices that are going to protect that. I also think this, when you talk about just our particular region, right, the Southwest has its own region, has own particular climate issues. But when we talk about, and so does the Northeast, every region has their own issues. When we talk about that Mississippi River, we talk about the importance of that river to the economy, however, the work that MRCTI and other people are doing to save the Mississippi or to strengthen the Mississippi has a direct relationship to the success of businesses up and down that corridor. So Cargill is one of the largest companies in the world. They do a ton of food production across the world, whether it's grain, whether it's beef or pork. They do a ton of exportation, and they set a lot of that up. They're on the Mississippi. That's how they got their start. General Mills, and I'm just speaking from my city. I'm not even talking about the steel off of in Blytheville, Arkansas, right? But General Mills, a giant consumer packaging good company, they also rely along production along that river. So there's very real reasons to make sure that river is doing well, the Mississippi is doing well, and that it's not continuously experiencing that drought. So, in our country, there's a saying, if it don't make dollars, it don't make sense, right? So we have to protect that just so that we can maintain competitiveness. And you may hear certain rhetoric, but behind the scenes, there's a very clear case being made that, hey, we've got to protect this infrastructure because this is vital to the importance of our economy. And the same conversation is going on outside of the Mississippi when you talk about the Southwest and some of the natural gas corridors and other energy sectors. They're also saying, well, how do we make this sustainable because our economy depends on that? So I know folks are concerned about whether the federal government will stay involved. My instinct is that the federal government, and we've had some talk with some of our U.S. congressional delegation staff while they were here, they're also saying, listen, we're also having conversations about how do we protect this infrastructure, and is it tax credits or is it another way? But there's conversations about how do we just do that, but there will be support there. I'd say the second thing is this, though, and a good point was made by the doctor in terms of, please forgive me with names, but there's a good point made about, when you're designing cities into the future, what is that spacing going to look like? Well, for us, we call it zoning, right? But what's that going to look like as we design our businesses or buildings going forward? And I do think there's going to be a space to advocate. I know MRCTI is doing this, but to advocate and say, well, at the federal level, we need someone that's going to help coordinate this in terms of resiliency and structures, but also to provide funding to say, for MRCTI or other similar situated organizations, we need folks who are going to come to the local government and say, we don't necessarily have, because of the local government, we don't have all the experience to say, well, how should this be zoned? What are the considerations? What are the best practices that you're seeing, not just in the U.S., but across the entire world? Where there's going to need to be some funding mechanisms put in place, not just in the United States, but I want to say in other countries, so that we have subject matter experts that are able to inform us on what's going on, and we can just design that from day one. Because cities are still growing. New structures are still being made. So rather than going back and retrofitting, right, how are we going to design that going forward? So I also think that is going to be a place that in our country, there's going to be more advocacy to say at the federal level, at the state level, please provide us some resources so that we have people who can help us design from day one what this new city should look like going forward so that it's sustainable for economic reasons.
Thank you. Dr. Jung, you have anything to add about Korean situation?
예, 제가 영어가 조금 부족해서 이 질문에 대한 대답은 통역을 부탁드리겠습니다.
So Dr. Jung will answer the question in Korean and I will interpret that in English. Thank you.
예, 2035 NDC 제출을 위해서 지금 한국 정부에서는 내년 이제 2월에 그 제출을 이제 계획을 하고 있는데 그 제출 전에 이제 지역 그다음에 민간 단체, 공공기관 등의 의견을 취합을 해서 공청회를 이제 예정을 하고 있고 의견을 조회한 후에 최종 NDC를 제출하려고 준비하고 있습니다.
So the Korean government is scheduling to introduce its own NDC in 2025 February, and before the introduction of the NDC, Korean government is planning to get a conversation between the individuals, public governments, and also the expertise regarding that sector before the introduction of NDC.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from the floor? Actually, I was not expecting such an interactive question and answer session. Oh, okay, there is one more question. Please.
Hello, my name is Im Dambi from KLRI. First of all, thank you to all the speakers for your excellent presentations. Given the challenges local governments face, that like coordinating with partners and balancing priorities such as public safety and economic growth, what strategy work best for gaining resident support for climate policy? Also, how can these strategies be added to current legal framework to strengthen local authority efforts? I'd especially like to hear from President Klisovich and Mayor Winston.
Right. Your question basically was what strategies do we have to involve citizens in participatory democracy or in as a co-legislator in this area. As I said, first of all, as I said, citizens are quite reluctant to accept change, particularly when it comes top-down. They sometimes perceive it as a threat, unless they see something for them in it. And what they see for them are usually tangible projects which contribute to the better quality of life in the cities. So citizens are basically fed up with the great words. They just want to see deeds materialized in practice. Otherwise, you can't get support. There's too much political marketing around, so they don't believe anybody. They don't believe to anybody. So how we do it in Zagreb? As I said, we have a couple of tools. One is a citizens' assembly, where citizens are provided with the opportunity to speak with elected representatives, decision makers, in other words. And these are quite constructive meetings. But what we as politicians realized that we get for these meetings only well-aware citizens who already have a stance, opinion, position on these issues, but that do not represent the majority of citizens which live in your city. So when you are guided by their opinion, then at one point of time you can face resistance from the silent majority of citizens. So that's why you need to have a tool how to reach those citizens who are not that interested in the matter or educated in the matter, but they count, their vote count, their voice count. So then we organized internet referendum. So whenever we have a major issue, then we invite all the citizens to vote on internet referendum. It's not a very reliable tool, but at least you reach a number of citizens, much more citizens than when those who appear in your city assembly for the citizens' talks. Then, of course, we use social networks, social media, to communicate with the citizens to get their response. We use press conferences where we explain the city policies in this area. So trying to do really our best But the best contact is personal contact. But since we have almost 1 million inhabitants in Zagreb, it's difficult to reach each and every of them. So we try to use these digital tools to involve them somehow into the policy making. And as I said, every citizens' assembly ends with a particular set of recommendations, which I and my team extract from the discussion with the citizens and then send to the mayor of Zagreb, to the government of Zagreb, and the European Union institutions. And these are the guidelines for our future work. Because there's one very important thing. If you want to engage honestly citizens, then you need to follow up on their recommendations. If you just neglect these recommendations, they won't appear next time for the meeting. So they must see that their opinion matters and has an impact on decision makers. Otherwise, you have just one chance and they won't appear anymore to discuss anything with you. And what is then even more important, that these words, the citizens' words, do not just implement or impact the policy making, but are instrumental in choosing the projects which you want to implement in order to implement climate policy and targets. Thank you.
So maybe your city is just a little bit larger than mine, but we have a little bit different in that we don't necessarily, if we're going to make certain changes, we don't necessarily have to go directly to the community for each one. In my city, the elections are every 4 years, but I think the way we have been able to basically, if I'm honest, sell it to residents is, so we're the 5th largest. We have a city that is the 4th largest that's above us. I'm not going to get too into details, but in terms of their business structure or commercial property values, they have $3.5 billion value more. And so that affects our ability to fund some of the things we want to do as a city. And residents increasingly know that, and they know that that affects their property taxes, how much they have to pay every year. They have to pay disproportionately more because we just don't have as much business. So the way we have been able to help people understand it is that if along the Mississippi corridor we're able to develop or we're able to build some of this green economy, that's going to bring businesses, that's going to bring jobs that have not necessarily been here before. So residents buy into that because they understand the argument that more jobs and more businesses means less taxes for them to pay. So they buy into it from that particular perspective. I also think that our state generally is a little bit more supportive of investing into clean energy. In Minnesota, they kind of get it a little bit more. But I think it's really, for us, it's really creating an argument that helps people buy into exactly why we're doing this. And, you know, we get the word out via social media. We have our regular, state of the cities. We have our city council meetings that happen on a weekly basis. So it's a matter of constantly keeping that in front of people that we have to be a part of this fight when it comes to climate change, but that fight is also going to directly benefit you in the form of more jobs, more businesses, more of the things you want, and then most important for most people is going to be, very much those lower property taxes. So you have to help educate people and help them understand, because if I'm honest, the things that people care most about in most cities, I can't speak for the entire world, but I have a sense, is they care about their safety. They want to feel safe. They want that public safety to be in place. And then they want jobs and a strong economy, and they want nice things to do within that economy. So they're not always thinking about what's happening with the climate because they're worried about putting food on the table. So it's very much creating a larger argument that sticks in the back of their head in terms of this climate change is going to help the economy, and it's going to help my pocketbook so that I can afford and do more of the things that I want to do. I think you have to take it locality by locality, though, because if you are experiencing floods on a regular basis, or if you're a farmer off the river and you're consistently experiencing drought and floods, then you know that you are part of this climate change fight immediately. But that's not always the majority of residents. So you have to craft arguments that people buy into, they believe in, and then you can go out and do your job as an elected official to get the resources, to get the right strategy in place, and then to go ahead and implement that strategy.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Klisovich and Mayor Winston. Any other question from the floor? I have a question. Okay. Actually, I was not expecting this much interactive session in Korean Pavilion. It's very rare. So I'd like to raise a question to Mayor Seung-won Park from Gwangmyeong City and Mayor Logan from Brightville. Actually, we have another mayor. We have two mayors here, and can you please stand up? And yeah, she's Mayor Logan from Brightville, Arkansas, USA. So I would like to ask you the same question. Usually, the representatives from cities and regions would like to share their experience, very successful experience and good results when they come to this kind of session. But I personally believe it is really important to share what not to do based on their experience, based on the experience of failure or from the challenges they might face in the past during the implementation process. So I'd like to ask you, if you don't mind, to share your experience about this. 시장님, 이런 행사 오시면 항상 우수 정책 그리고 잘한 결과에 대해서 많이들 공유를 하는데요. 시장님께서 기후 정책을 추진하시면서 분명히 실패했던 정책도 있을 것이고 그 과정에서 추진하는 과정에서 어려운 점도 있으셨을 거예요. 그런데 이 우수 정책을 공유하는 것만큼 그런 어려웠던 과정 그리고 그것을 극복했던 과정을 공유하는 것이 다른 도시가 시행착오를 줄이는 데 굉장히 도움이 될 거라고 생각합니다. 그래서 거기에 대한 말씀 한마디 부탁드립니다.
가장 중요한 것은 교육과 연대라고 생각합니다. 그 많은 사람들이 함께 이 의제를 공유하고 함께 행동하기 위한 전략들을 모아가는 것들이 매우 필요하다고 보는데요. 그것을 최우선적으로 하는 것이 필요하다고 생각하고 따라서 이 길을 가는 데 있어서 반대하는 세력들을 어떻게 좀 포용하고 가느냐가 중요한 문제인 것 같고요. 두 번째로는 아직 검증되지 않은 여러 가지 기술들을 함부로 적용하면 안 된다라는 생각을 갖고 있습니다. 거기에 많은 예산을 투자하게 되면 오히려 그 앞으로 나가는데 어려움이 있기 때문에 이 두 가지 영역을 좀 깊이 있게 고민하고 갔으면 좋겠다라는 생각입니다.
Most important thing is that the cooperation with the educational the side, and it's for the sharing the climate related topic, and then the aggregated the information at the same time, and then the sharing among the community. That's the most important thing. And the second thing is also we need to embrace the opposite side of the group so against the climate change. And lastly, it seems there are quite a few the companies engaging on the greenwashing thing. So we should be careful to approach them. Even though I'm quite skeptical about this, but yeah, like we have to be really careful to assess them and then like taking care of this climate the action.
Thank you. And Mayor Logan, if you don't mind.
Well, thank you for including me in this discussion. I am very honored to be a part of this. What I can tell you from being a mayor of a smaller city, I'm a mayor of a city of about 15,000 that is 75% African American. And so the impacts of climate change on people of color is disproportionately more than it would be in most other places. So we have to represent well and join larger organizations, which is why we are represented by the larger organization, Mississippi River Cities and Towns, because you will see that there is economic racism and along the Mississippi River, where resources are going to the largest cities. And so I must be present, or a representative from our area has to be at the table so that we're not forgotten. Often it is resources go to where they think that they can get the largest return on their investment. But in my mind, if you can feed one, that's still a true investment. So economic disparity is something that we experience. We also experience racial disparity and global disparity, because we understand that there are some areas in the United States that we don't honor climate change, and so it's moving at a much faster rate in the Eastern world rather than the Western world. So my advice would be to just stay engaged, especially as a smaller city. I must stay engaged. I must do the work. And the pandemic was very crucial. Turning point for us. We lost all of our recycling locales. And so just this year, in the month of October, we started to reestablish a new circularity in my city. So we will be the first city in the state to re-engage in the circularity process. And so it's very critical that we stay engaged.
Thank you very much for your answer, Mayor Logan. So I hope today's session is very productive for all of you. It was fun with a lot of questions. And I hope, again, this session will help us to strengthen our solidarity towards green world. You know the slogan of COP29, right? Solidarity. So please make your voice listened and do act. And I will meet you at next COP30 at Brazil. Thank you very much. 고맙습니다.